Hello. Wow, you picked right when the show was starting.
I know.
Do that. Why? Hello. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Transatlantic Call-In Show. I am Arden Hart. This is the show where you get to call in and ask two trans people all of the questions you have about anything and everything trans-related. So, whether you are skeptical, in the not correct use of the word skeptic, about trans issues and trans healthcare, or maybe you're a parent that doesn't quite understand things all the way. We welcome all of those calls, and we are excited to talk to you all today. Like I said, I am your host, Arden Hart, and with me today is a return guest, Naomi. Naomi, welcome back. It's so good to see you.
Hey, great to be back. Thank you so much.
Yeah, what's been going on since you've been here last? What's new for
Uh,
you?
a lot of parenting stuff. I had a lot of sicknesses running through the family over Christmas, bouts of hand, foot, and mouth and strep throat, but feeling better, really glad to be here. And it's been nice spending a lot of time with my kiddos lately.
Aw, yeah, I mean, I guess in spite of illness, that is kind of a pleasant takeaway, so that's
Yeah.
great. Um, well, sorry, my train of thought got derailed by a baby snake being delivered to me. Um, let me do some housekeeping stuff for the line before we get rolling. While Transatlantic is definitely the best show on the line, most interesting content by far, there are some other shows. If you have absolutely nothing else to do with your time, here I have a few recommendations. For example, on the Sunday show, this week is going to be Matt Dillahunty and Shannon Q. That is the place where if you are a theist or a Christian and you really want to brawl about your beliefs, that is the place where we do those kinds of debates. On Monday, we have Skep Talk at 6 p.m. Central Time, and that's going to be with Erica Gutsick-Gibbon this week, joined by Jackson Wheat. That's going to be an awesome episode. I definitely love both of them individually on science, so I can't wait to hear some of the callers that they might take together. Next Wednesday will be Matt on the Hang Up with Andrew Seidel, so that's going to be huge. Love having Andrew Seidel here. If you don't know him, he is, I believe, he's a lawyer of some type that has done work with, I think it's Freedom from Religion Foundation, working on lawsuits and cases where there are like violations of the wall between religion and government, and litigating those sort of cases. So we really value his input on, especially, while Transatlantic doesn't really talk about religious issues a lot, I think obviously trans people are affected by those breaches significantly. So we love to hear what he has to say. And then next week, it'll be back here on Transatlantic with myself, Arden Hart, and Katy Montgomerie. So be sure to subscribe so you can check all that good stuff out. But until then, we're going to check out every week here on Transatlantic. We like to do some polls to just kind of talk about sort of current events, sometimes general trans topics, gives you guys some maybe something to talk about if you have strong feelings about anything we say during the poll. Last week's poll, we asked you guys, with 6,000 votes, do you think this year Republicans will break their record on proposed anti-LGBTQ bills in 2024? The redundancy is killing me, but I make these things on a fly, so don't be mad. 86% of that 6,000 said yes, and 14% said no. I don't. So we're already on track to blow last year's 500 out of the water. I think we're at 300 something now. And those are just proposed bills. 14%, I did scroll through the comments. I didn't see anyone really justifying why they said no. I did see a number of people suggesting something along the lines of, what anti-LGBTQ bills? These are bills that are just defending science and reality or something along those lines, as if those things are mutually exclusive, right? So, yeah, I don't know. Naomi, do you have any thoughts on the wealth of bills that I'm sure we're going to see tumbling down the pipeline soon?
Yeah, I mean, it's just been the same exponential trend again and again. I mean, if anybody was going to try to come up with an optimistic view of the no, I think the idea would be we've seen how just unpopular these anti-trans bills are with a lot of the Republican voter bases even. And it's just one of the last issues that actual Republican voters care about. And so you would hope that the Republican Party would start to shift away from this, but maybe they haven't learned their lesson, just want to keep losing elections. So
I'm right there with you. It has been losing them elections, and I hope it continues to. And I hope that, if they cling on to this, and that is the ship in Jaws going under and they just want to hold on to the mast as it goes down, I fully support their right to do so.
Yeah.
Yeah, and hopefully we'll see another similar trend where only a very, very, very small percentage of the proposed bills even get anywhere remotely close to implemented. I think our courts have been doing a good job at addressing those things in most cases, not all. But that kind of leads us into this week's poll, which is a little wordy. In your opinion, are there actually a meaningful amount of circumstances in which a gender/sex marker on a driver's license aids relevant authorities in accurately identifying the ID holder? So it's a little confusing, but I think we can figure out what's going on here. So basically, I'm asking you that in a situation where someone's ID is needed, like a cop or maybe a bouncer at a exclusive event, how meaningful the sex marker is to helping that person in that situation identify the person that they're looking at. I would wager that it is actually not really meaningful ever. And this isn't to say that your sex assigned at birth could never be relevant or that there weren't situations where someone having that information might be important. I think there probably are, but I don't think that having it on the driver's license itself is important. And the reason I bring this up is because this week, the executive director, I'm going to get his exact position wrong, basically the equivalent of the Florida DMV. I think it's like the Highway Patrol and Department of Motor Vehicles or something like that, issued a guidance ahead of a proposed bill that's being floated in Florida, saying that Florida will no longer be accepting requests to change ID markers on driver's licenses, and that ones who have been changed might be at risk of being voided, which is a kind of crazy scenario. Normally in those situations, somebody would get like grandfathered in. But clearly the goal is the continuing attack on trans people here. And they claim that the issue is that it increases risk of fraud. I saw that was one statement that was released by this executive director man. I should probably find his name. If anyone in the chat knows it off the top of their head and wants to give it to me, that would be great. But basically, I'm just saying that I'm not convinced that changing your ID, especially in 2024, can meaningfully hide you from fraud. I think there's going to be a paper trail. In order to get the gender marker change, there's a paper trail. We are in touch with everything online all the time nowadays. There's going to be a digital footprint. I don't think changing your ID would meaningfully help anyone commit fraud or help relevant authorities properly identify the person. So I'm wagering maybe the right move here is for us to abolish sex markers on IDs altogether. But maybe that's totally short-sighted. I don't know. Naomi, what do you think?
Yeah, and that's not even mentioning that, like, a lot of times the only time that the sex marker on an ID is relevant is when it creates confusion, where it's like you have somebody who might be intersex or trans, or just they don't look like the gender that's on their ID. Maybe it's a really old ID, and then they either get some looks or some weird questioning, whereas in, like, a social sense, it doesn't really matter what kind of marker is on an ID like that. And if you're going to, like, a doctor's office, you can just tell them the relevant medical details.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking. Like, I've never really had, I've gone to a medical office and had them take a copy of my ID, sure, but never did the doctor go, let me see, okay, you are a male according to your ID, or anything like that, right? Like, they just read what's on your file, and I think you could definitely include that information there so that people wouldn't need that on their ID. There probably are some situations where it's important or relevant. I'm not saying that there are absolutely none. I'm just saying that I can't think of them right now, and I think it is maybe a good alternative for these running into these issues altogether to just say, we actually don't even need this. To be honest, nowadays we have, there's a photo on the ID, like I said, about like there's digital footprints and paper trails for most people are leaving that could tell you so many details about their life and their habits. Where I'm not sure that this is actually meaningfully accomplishing anything other than sort of being a pink triangle for trans people to wear. Like, we're going to brand you as, you know, you are the trans person. We're going to have to know that. We want to be able to know that. We want to be able to point to it and say it's the case. it also seems to be kind of a balk back to when trans people will be like, well, I'm legally female, see? Or like trans women, I've seen lots of trans women do that online. Um, yeah, it just doesn't seem like it's really accomplishing anything to force trans people to keep their ID matching with their sex assigned at birth. So yeah, if you guys have thoughts on that, definitely go vote on the poll. That's under our community tab on the Lions YouTube channel. I would love to hear what you guys have to say so we can continue that conversation next week. But until then, we've got a few callers on the line that I would love just to get to. So let's just dive right in. You ready, Naomi?
Absolutely, let's do it.
All right. First up, we have Lexi in Ohio. Pronouns are she, her. Lexi, you are on the line. What's going on?
Hi there. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
I have a friend who's a little younger than me, and they're going through some gender trouble.
Mhm.
And as a trans person, I'm really worried about navigating that. You don't want to really just say, you're trans, or you really need to explore this. But we plan on meeting up on Saturday and cooking dinner together and having a good conversation about these things. I wanted to get some advice on how to navigate things like that.
Yeah. Naomi, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I think that when you're looking at these kind of situations, probably just the best thing you can do is like encouraging openness and exploration. Kind of just like creating an environment where people feel comfortable enough to see if they want to like try to push on some boundaries, see if they want to explore some new things, try some things on, things like that, where it's just like this is a welcoming environment to explore things. I thought it might be fun. We can try it, and just wherever it leads, that's a-okay.
Yeah. I definitely.
That's my plan. I was going to bring some. I was going to bring some nail polish. I'm sorry, didn't mean to interrupt you, Arden.
No, that's totally fine. Yeah, I mean, you kind of mentioned that, like, you don't want to, like, tell them to just start exploring, but I kind of wonder why, because I don't think to tell someone, like, you should start exploring or could start exploring is to say that, like, you are going to have this outcome, right? Like, I think it's totally fine if you're like, you should start exploring, wear nail polish, grow your hair long, start wearing different clothes if you want. And if that leads you to feeling like you're non-binary, great. If that leads you to feeling like you're a woman, then great. If that leads you to being like, no, I'm just a person who likes to wear this kind of stuff and express myself this way, that's also great. There's no like real negative consequence to exploring gender in that way. So I can understand where you're coming from.
That's exactly the tough part. Because I agree with you on all that. That's really important. And that's how I feel. There's just times where someone's dealing with their issues with transitioning. They may know they want to transition. And that's the case with my friend, is that he knows he wants to do something about this. But something's going on. He's guilty about something. He is involved in education around children. So there's a larger conversation. That's really the issue that you guys might be able to enlighten me on.
Yeah, I think that kind of starting out with a situation like that, it's always important to remember that like you can have really good boundaries around this, where it's like, exploring can be something I just do in my own time, and even just the private of my own home before I'm comfortable doing something out in public, or maybe even I just try it in my own home. I'm like, this is not for me. I don't want to go out in public, do anything kind of gender expansive. But growing up, people internalize a lot of just like entirely made up barriers and boundaries around gender that I think is kind of worth pointing out that like, where is this coming from? Like, seems like you've got a lot of weird boundaries around gender, and I thought it might be fun to try to like explore around that and just see what feels good. And we can just keep this in the private of our own home, just whatever feels fun, and have a good time together.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep, I totally agree.
I think it, with regard to this person maybe working with kids to some extent as like a teacher or whatever, there's definitely a concern with, I don't know what Ohio's laws are like, or if this person necessarily even is in Ohio like you, but I do think maybe there's some concern with like wanting to be careful at the level to which that information is getting to, the kids you're working with. But I think like Naomi said, I think you can definitely have easy boundaries on that. And if you're feeling like, deprived of your ability to do these things in public, you could always like do what I think trans people for decades before the internet did, and that's like skip downtown, like to the next town over or something, and go get groceries there, and kind of like use that opportunity where like you're not going to necessarily know everyone that you're running into to explore that. But yeah, I'm not sure that I
Yeah,
have
I
too much
understand.
more details on that. Is that like helpful, or do you feel like we're missing the mark? I'd love to know how we can get more
I
to the
feel
point for
like
you.
a lot of that's really helpful because that really makes me feel like it's not a bad idea to suggest exploring gender in their own time, because this person uh, feels really guilty and ashamed about all this, and yet you know and and I I actually, just thinking back on it, I've met a much older trans mask person the other day, because I'm getting involved with the queer community here in Columbus. Um, and I realized that I can connect him to this person. Reach out to both of them, and and give him an idea, someone who has more experience on navigating this career with being trans. And so I really appreciate. Oh, by the way, the laws in Ohio. So from what the ACLU think, I've learned from their website, is that um, they there's no protections against housing and employment LGBTQ people as a state. It's up to the cities themselves to create laws about that, and there are 36 cities that have created those laws, and we are in one of them. Columbus has a really good queer community, and I think there's hope for my friends. And I really appreciate you guys having me on and giving me really good advice.
Well, I definitely will second that. There is a lot of hope for your friend. And I definitely say, if you know people who have gone through what this person's about to go through, definitely like advice from other
Well,
trans
I've been
people
through it.
informs so much.
I'm a trans woman.
Right. Right.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. With education, I'm sorry. I'm a little flustered. My bad.
No, totally fine.
All
That's
good, all
also a
good.
huge part of it. I think the experience of transition is also really meaningful to, sort of baby trans people who are just starting to like dip their toe in the experience of being outwardly trans in a very cisnormative culture. It's stressful and kind of a big deal, and I think all the advice you can get is really meaningful. So yeah, I wish you and your
I
friend the best of
appreciate it.
luck.
Yeah, I think that just have a fun
Uh,
time with your friend.
Mhm.
yeah, exactly. I don't. I'm not. I want them to take this at their own pace. We're gonna have a fun time no matter what. Um, Thank you so much, everyone. Sorry for interrupting a little bit. Like I said, I'm a little flustered.
No, you were totally fine, Lexi. No worries. Thank you for calling in. I appreciate it. You have a wonderful
Yeah,
day.
appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Bye.
Keep doing what you're doing, okay?
I will do my best.
Thank you,
Bye.
thank you.
Uh, uh, Wait, hold on. I want to make sure that the call-in studio's able to hear the show. Yes, okay. Yeah, no worries about interrupting. There is a delay between my mic going out, and there's a delay between call-in studio and that input. So we're just going to interrupt people here. It happens with a show like this, so don't worry if you need to interrupt, or if I interrupt you. It's probably not hostile. Unless you say something wrong and I'm trying to correct the record, then it might become hostile. But for the most part, it's just something that happens. So coming up next, we've got Daniel. Pronouns are he, him in Mississippi. Daniel, you are live on the line. What is going on?
Hello. I never understood why people said they were so nervous when they call in, but I get it now.
Yeah, what's up? What do you want to talk about?
So I was wondering about trying to battle internalized transphobia.
Yeah, do you have like a specific
Like,
question or?
yeah. Like, is this like a pre-op trans woman or something? Like, forgive me for the word choice, but like, just like, like, I don't know. Just doesn't, like, I am all for trans people. I have no problems with it, but I just like, seeing a person presenting masculine with like makeup and stuff just doesn't hit me the right way. I don't know.
Yeah. So we've had a very similar topic on the show a couple of times before. Something I generally like to tell people is if you've like logicked your way to the notion that trans people and, you know, even cis people who are just gender nonconforming should be allowed to express themselves in whatever way makes them comfortable as long as they aren't hurting anyone, then I think you should probably be a little bit forgiving with the initial emotional, like, lizard brain, for lack of a better term. I know that's not a great phrase or whatever, but I think you should forgive yourself for having that sort of initial reaction, because a lot of that is deeply learned and really pounded into you as a kid mentally of like how to think about these groups of people. And for the most part, I think it's totally acceptable to be in a state where you maybe have that initial emotional reaction, but then you just reason your way out of it. You say, wow, that person made me feel kind of weird, but really at the end of the day, they're just a person who's wearing makeup that I wouldn't traditionally think would wear makeup, and that's fine. Yeah, I tend to advocate for, I think, a little patience and forgiveness with ourselves on these things, because you can't override your learned conditioning like overnight or very easily. It takes time, but it also takes active effort. Like, you have to be willing to be like, oh, this is wrong that I'm having this emotional reaction and I got to work on that. But don't be like hard on yourself thinking you're a bad person or anything, you know? Naomi, you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I think that like when we feel those kind of like raw emotional feelings, it's kind of helpful to ask ourselves like, okay, where is this coming from? Like growing up, we receive a ton of messaging. We internalize this messaging about like there's a right and a wrong way to do gender. And depending on where you grew up, you're going to have completely different ideas on what's the right way and what's the wrong way to do gender. And so for this person, they're just doing their gender in the way that's right for them. Much in the same way that you're doing what's right for you in the time being. And so is everybody trying to do what's right for them. And so I think that when we have those kind of feelings, it's important to recognize that like just having a feeling is going to come up from a lot of this, you know, raw emotional responses that are ingrained in us that we don't have a lot of control over. But we do have control over our thoughts. And so we can acknowledge the feeling. Just having a feeling is intrinsically morally a neutral thing. But what we can control is our thoughts and our behavior. And so you now have some tools that you can use to kind of combat these thoughts. Point out to yourself like, well, why does, you know, gender have to be like a certain way of like you can't be masculine and wear makeup? And once you just have this like trained response where you see an emotional reaction like that, and you just talk yourself down from, well, I can logic my way through this. You eventually become really good at logicking your way through it a lot faster, and then it just becomes completely natural and normal once this gets really established as like a habit.
All right. I had a question, but now it is gone.
That's all right. Have you tried anything like that?
Wait.
Or yeah, sorry, go on with your question.
I remember what I was gonna say. Like, I've never been farther away because you saw my tag. I live in Mississippi. I've never been farther away than like the Florida Panhandle.
Mm.
So that's probably why I do have problems with it, because I've never experienced anybody like that.
Sure. Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense.
Like, yeah, like there's a quote or whatever that like it's like if you'll be against gay marriage until like you have a gay family member or something, and then you'll get it. Like, I guess I have to just wait until I see a trans person, or I hopefully will get it.
Yeah, I think there's a great like thing you just pointed out, that a lot of people will, you know, be really anti-LGBTQ until an LGBTQ person is in their own family, like their immediate family, and then that usually forces them to change. But what I've found is that usually the first change isn't even like, oh, now I'm good with queer people. It's usually like, well, you're okay. You're not all of the things that I have prejudiced beliefs about, but the rest of the trans people are still like that. I think it takes time and exposure to overcome those things. And you definitely can't blame yourself if you lack that exposure for not having had the opportunities to challenge those thoughts. But I do think it's important to do that, to actively make an effort to challenge those thoughts. Like, I know as a kid, I was raised in an environment that was pretty misogynistic towards women in general. And that was something I had to actively work on when I was coming into transition and being like, man, part of the reason that I think I hate myself so much as a trans person is because of these values that I was raised with about women and women's place and like women's worth and all these things, and having the opportunity to actively like spend a lot of time combating those things in your head. It's work, but I think it's work worth doing, and I think you'll find yourself probably like a happier person individually when you are like, wow, I'm so glad I learned to stop caring how other people present themselves, because that was a huge waste of mental effort.
Yeah, and the fact that like you on this call just recognizing like I'm getting this disgust response and like why is that? Because that's kind of completely bullcrap. Like that's a really good first step at recognizing I know what's going on and I want to challenge this. I want to work on that. So that's wonderful.
Agreed.
All right. And I did have a second subject to talk about, and sorry if the call screen didn't tell you, and I'm just dropping this on you, but
It's all right.
like I've noticed that you and Katy and stuff have all stopped saying the like term TERF, and I'm wondering like 'cause, like I've heard that TERFs don't want to be called it anymore, but I don't feel like you should just cave to those people, right? If that's your reasoning, I'm not trying to assume anything.
It really wasn't an intentional stopping using the term. I do think there's a decent argument against using the term TERF, and that is you are essentially granting in that situation that anti-trans people are radical feminists, when that is the case sometimes, but most of the time I think it is not the case. And that's definitely why I tend to opt for the term like gender critical. I think that is a more accurate way to describe the group of people who are cohesively working to remove trans rights or to, prevent the progression of trans rights. There definitely are a swath of those people who would consider themselves radical feminists. But I think most of the time it's just not accurate. But it wasn't like an intentional trying to change the language thing. I think it was just a happenstance. So
yeah,
but it's
I think a lot of it. I think a lot of it also has to do with kind of like the way that the gender critical movement has evolved, where like the earliest members of the gender critical movement was like fringe academics who were previously like well vested in radical feminism, and since then it's kind of blown into this mainstream conservative movement where it's completely devoid from the radical feminist roots that some of the like earliest members of this movement were a part of. And so I think the movement has evolved in just being far more like conservative, reactionary, and just having like really binary, old school kind of like gender views that they want to impose on people.
Yeah, I would agree.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd
Go on.
You can go.
It's like when you try to pass someone and you both start moving the same direction over and over again. That's what sometimes it's like on the show with the delay. I just wanted to make sure that, you feel like we got to your question and hopefully gave you some ideas about how to combat that sort of internalized transphobia. The fact that you even know what to call it is already a really good sign as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of the show. I watch it all the time.
Awesome.
But I think I'm happy with my responses. I will give you a hashtag team on Arden and be on my way.
Yes. Thank you so much, Daniel. You have a wonderful day.
Thank you. You too. And Matt. And
Take the
Naomi.
call. Bye.
Bye. All right. Real quick before we move on with the next call, I want to do a few more of my linely duties. I want to remind you guys that patreon.com/calltheline is the best way to support this network. We are really, really gunning to get LineCon for the latter half of this year. A big convention where, just like most of the other like atheist sort of YouTube conventions, we can bring everyone here, kind of maybe do some live shows here, do some events, and have like live Q&As and stuff and get to meet all of you guys. We really want to get that happening. And our Patreon is definitely the best method to support the network to get us there. We've got a lot of changes coming this year, a lot of growth, hopefully, along with that. And so we're excited to show you guys all the stuff we're doing, and I hope you guys are excited to see it all. And last thing, if you have seen that, I don't have the little graphic up that I've been using for Match Show. If you've seen that awesome all-over print hoodie that Jimmy's been wearing, at linemerch.com, you can get that one or the pink one, as well as a a classic The Lion mug, and a You're on the Line shirt. So there's a whole bunch of merch at linemerch.com for you to grab if you are into that. All right. With all that out of the way, the next one, we'll see how this goes. Maybe a controversial topic, but maybe a respectful caller. We'll find out. We've got Nate in California. Pronouns are he, him. Nate wants to ask, Nate is on the fence about trans women in sports. Nate, why don't you go ahead and pitch us what you want to get into?
Sure. Yeah, and thanks for taking my call. And then, so there's a little bit of history, which I'll take a few seconds to narrate. I had a conversation about the subject with Katy Montgomerie. I'm not sure if it was on this show or some other show she is on. And also Jim, right? And the responses I got from them weren't entirely satisfactory. And so Katie's, in a word, her message was, this is one of these smaller issues, right? The bigger issues to deal with, so don't sweat too much about it, which really wasn't very satisfying to me. And also Jim brought up testosterone and all kinds of scientific stuff, but then also kind of admitted that in some sense, the jury is still out. Right? It's not a done and dusted deal.
Sure.
And just out of curiosity, I wanted to kind of labor this dialogue with you folks. I incidentally happened to try calling Matt and Jimmy in the previous line show, but I think what they recommended was I speak to your team here on Thursday. So I think this is a good venue to do that.
Yeah, thank you for doing that, because we do have a lot of those shows are usually more oriented towards like atheism and politics, and sometimes people really want to know what the white men on this network have to say about trans issues, and it's nice when they call us and ask us about it. I would say,
right,
to some extent, the jury is still out on exactly the effects of puberty on athletic performance and the ways that HRT mitigates or interacts with that. Now, what I'm not saying is that trans women have this conclusive advantage that we should just ban them from. I don't think that at all. I think, in fact, in most cases, I would say until we actually have some conclusive evidence, I don't think any action is really warranted. But my problem is kind of the conclusions that people want to draw from that. Like, even if we assume that it's just the case that trans women have this huge athletic advantage that is not mitigated by hormones or anything at all, right? I don't think the ethical response to that situation is let's ban trans women, in particular teenage girls at the high school level, from participating in sports with their peers. I think what seems like a more rational approach to me is restructuring how we orient these leagues in general. Something that I love, I'm not a sports person. I don't really watch or participate in sports at all. Of the things that I do kind of watch, they're definitely more like dex oriented. And in a lot of those sorts of sports, you'll notice that women actually have eked out into participating at the top level sports with men in a couple of cases. And I think that's really awesome, because I think it demonstrates that men don't just have this inherent advantage at all times. Like, a really good example was curling, right? Some people think that men have this advantage in curling because they can sweep faster. But there was one study I was reading a couple weeks ago that seemed to think that while they can sweep faster on average, and that might lead to some sort of advantage initially in a competition, they actually tend to peak, and then their performance drops throughout the course of the performance, whereas women have a more consistent performance overall throughout a game of curling. I don't know what you'd call it. And so they end up kind of like averaging out pretty close to each other. I'm comfortable with us wanting to advocate for either dividing sports into groups based on fairness and improving competition. And I'm also okay with us saying, we're just going to divide groups into like the man group and then like the inclusive group. But I think if the goal of women's sports, right, if women aren't inferior to men in those sports, and the goal of women's sports is to provide an avenue where representation is there and inclusion is there, it seems silly to me to exclude trans women from participating in that. But I don't know, Naomi, what are your thoughts on trans sports? I think
I think that anybody that's kind of approaching this issue from like a very scientific perspective, what we really want is a nuanced policy that's going to ensure fairness and inclusivity to the best degree possible. And when I say to the best degree possible, I think it's important to recognize that there's never going to be a perfect solution to fairness and inclusivity in sports, even excluding like trans people from the equation altogether. I mean, we have cases of like intersex athletes, of people that are born with genetic anomalies like Michael Phelps that are just like biologically made to swim. And so you're never going to have this kind of perfect fairness going into it. And then the other thing is there's just a lot of like cases where people aren't even considering like the very clear cut cases. Like, for example, the thing that we're most concerned about being a potential like fairness factor would be if going through a testosterone dominant puberty would have some kind of like lasting impacts. Take a look at like trans kids that go on puberty blockers, for example. There would be no reason to exclude them from sports due to fairness considerations because they never went through that testosterone dominant puberty. If they went on puberty blockers and started taking estrogen, there would never be any opportunity for something like that to happen. And there's a lot of literature that's currently evolving. Sports medicine scientists are actively working on this problem, trying to figure out, you know, what are potential advantages, what are potential mitigations, what are different strategies we can implement in different sports. And I think that we can kind of handle this on like a sport by sport basis with individualized policies. You know, maybe for some sports, we can implement systems like ELO scores or other kind of like ranking systems to try to come up with fairer matches, regardless of like whatever gender someone was assigned at birth. Like Arden said, the example of at high school level and below, these sports are often just more about like, you know, cooperation, working with peers, having fun, than about elite competition. And then we can also just look at some like real world examples where the Olympics has allowed trans athletes to compete at the Olympic level for decades. And there has never been a trans woman who medically transitioned, competed in the female league, and won a medal. That's never happened in decades of this being allowed. So if this was some kind of like huge epidemic that was just like destroying the Olympics, I think we would have seen a trans person win a single medal by now, you know?
Yeah. Kind of building off of that, I do want to give you a chance to speak, Nate, but one thing to add to that is kind of building off that notion of the Olympics having guidelines that allowed trans people to participate for so long. In the most recent Olympics, I believe there was a trans woman who was playing in the qualifying rounds for weightlifting, but she didn't actually qualify, which, you know, kind of is like ironic when people are like, oh, trans women are going to dominate sports. I mean, what if we went really crazy and let women do the things that men do, like weightlifting? And it's like a trans woman did do that, and she didn't even qualify compared to cis women who did qualify and did perform well enough to qualify. So, yeah, I think.
Yeah.
Well, I definitely think fairness seems important in sports. Despite not being a sport person, I can recognize that is a very important thing to people who are heavily involved in sports and athletics. I just think that the way that they talk about fairness with regard to trans women doesn't really seem to be aligned with reality or any of the facts like actually impacting performance. So, yeah. How does that all land with you, Nate?
I appreciate the way you folks have explained this. It's really good. And so the couple of things that I want to take away from this conversation is I do like how Naomi put it, to say maybe there is need for us as a society, right, to kind of look at it on a sport by sport basis, right? Cannot have a blanket brush for everything. That's important, and also, like I think you said, Arden, I think there is need for us to kind of also have more nuances to this, make a more detailed analysis, understand issues a little bit more at a scientific level, and then make determinations of how we need to segregate or how we need to categorize who competes where. just to be fair, right, to everybody. I think in that sense, I think I like the way you folks are thinking. Not that I'm making up my mind fully, to be honest, but this definitely serves as very valuable input.
Yeah. Thank you,
Yeah,
Nate.
it's just an intellectual thing, right? I don't have an issue. Neither. I'm very much on the fence, right? Right? On the fence. I'm thinking hard. Because I myself am not trans, I'm cis, right? So it's very hard for me to empathize with that. While I'm all for gender equality, inclusiveness, and everything, obviously. But these are things that kind of pop into my head that I want to talk about. But thanks for taking the time. It's really good.
Yeah, thanks, Nate. I appreciate
it so kindly.
Yeah, appreciate the question. Like things like this, coming to a solid grounded position where you have like a solid evidence backing, that takes time to like fully convince yourself, to fully understand everything going on, to think of like edge cases and nuance. And so I think it's good that you're thinking about these things and looking for more information and just want the best for people. Like that's what the direction we should be going in.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. And so there was one other topic that I also wanted to talk about, if you folks have the time.
Yeah, I think we've got time.
I don't know if I can not spend a whole lot of time on this, but this was it might come across as being a little trolly, right? But it's not. Let me assure you of that. Which is that I'm thinking that we may have misgendered Jesus Christ, right? All these things. Okay. And
I think I already know the whole argument you're
going
to make.
You already know the reasoning for it. Let's take a shot at it. Let me, if you're off track, I'll tell you what I was thinking.
Yeah, I mean, you're basically trying to suggest that the only instance where there are virgin births are when when parthenogenesis is happening, and so the only way that scientifically Jesus could have been born to a virgin mother was if he was an exact clone of his mother, therefore being female.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly, yes.
I get the argument, and I kind of appreciate the humor in it, but I definitely think if you're trying to appeal to like an evangelical Christian to convince them of that, I think they're probably gonna smack that away pretty fast, considering there's never been an observed case of parthenogenesis in humans, and mammals in general seem to not be very good with that. Even the species who are good with that, like reptiles, there's a much, much higher rate of failure to thrive in the offspring in parthenogenic clutches, with the exception of a few species who have specialized in it. There are a few like species of agamids and geckos and things that are fully parthenogenic, all females who also simulate sexual activity, which is really interesting. You have these giant lesbian gecko colonies parthenogenically making clone babies. Fascinating. Anyway, sorry. I won't rant on lesbian gecko clones. Anyway, thank you so much for calling, Nate. I appreciate the topic.
Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. Take care, guys. Thank you much for your time.
Bye. All right. See, this is what I mean. I've been saying lately that our callers have been not really on a pro-trans side of issues, but more interested in understanding and genuinely, sincerely having a dialogue rather than trying to be like, let's have this war from we both have our sides and I have to defend it no matter what evidence is presented. It feels really good. I like that our community is moving that direction. But next, we're just going to keep taking things in order that they come in. I see there's some spicy ones down the line, but for now, we're going to talk to Alan in Washington. Pronouns are he, him. Alan, you're on the line. What's going on?
Hi. It's kind of complicated to explain, but I explained it a little bit in my first call, where my parents have been moved to assisted living, but I'm dependent on them in order to live. And I'm also one of the social workers I talked to informs me I am more than qualified to be on disability, but so we're literally just kind of starting the process of doing that. I'm being told that can take upwards of years to get.
Okay.
In the meantime, my brothers on the other end of the family they're not understanding of anything about my situation. So, to try to avoid a rant, the only, in their eyes, if I don't get social services to get me to the moon yesterday, I can't, according to them, I can't continue to receive support from my parents. But my parents can, at the same time, inform me that they are willing to support me in any way that they can for the time being. And I failed to adequately explain. My brothers have been fairly malicious in their behavior towards me, to the point to where the therapist I'm talking, actually just every doctor I explain this to, tells me not to talk to my brothers, which is causing this horrible loop where they're trying to punish me for not talking to them. And this has led to them locking me out of the old house, which is like, to try just a short list of things. They've demanded that I give them access to my medical data, or they won't support me whatsoever. And if I don't, again, as I said, if I don't get social services to act faster than they can actually act, they're basically giving me ultimatums to take away any kind of support that I would have. And this part of the problem is that because I'm financially dependent on my parents, this results in me not kind of having money to spend. And so part of the problem here is that I've been locked out of the house, which prevents me from effectively doing my laundry altogether, because where I live, it costs money to do the laundry, and I don't exactly have that money.
Yeah.
Sorry, it's just, and
okay.
I've been trying to move forward with transitioning, because over the last, I don't know, couple years of listening to everybody, I finally came to the realization late last year, and I came out, like I mentioned, I can't come out to my parents, but I can't. It makes it difficult because the way my brothers are acting, they see anything I say or do as an excuse, and I'm just afraid that they're going to be extra malicious if I even try to explain to them my position.
Yeah. So if we can jump in, I mean, just from the preliminary thoughts, hearing your situation, I think.
Sorry
and I
about
remember
ranking.
I remember talking to you before, Alan, a couple times now. I think. I do think that you should, if I were in your shoes, and that's not necessarily saying you should do this or that you need to take my advice, obviously. I think I would accept the reality that it sounds like they are likely to be malicious and to try to make things difficult. And considering you said that your support is coming from your parents and they aren't interested in stopping the support just because your brothers suck, I think I would just it sounds like you might be in a situation where there could be, I don't know exactly what laws are being broken, but it sounds like they are actively harassing you and making life worse for you. I think there may be a route with regard to litigation that is worth pursuing. I'm not sure, but I think really, I'm not sure what advice I could give you that isn't just, I'm so sorry you're in that situation. That is really awful. And I think the most you can do is say, fuck them. I have to live my life. My parents are going to support me. And it's not their decision to make. And they can be mad and they can not like me and they can be transphobic. They're allowed to be all those things as much as it sucks. And to just say, well, in spite of how they are, I'm not going to deny myself the right to live my life, or just because they're actively hostile towards me because of it. As far as the routes of what you can go about, how to go about addressing their behavior, I'm not entirely sure. Naomi, do you have any thoughts on kind of the situation so far?
Yeah, that's really tricky, and it's going to depend a lot on like any kind of local laws or systems, resources around you that might be able to intervene in those kind of situations. I'm not entirely sure what would be available there. I don't know if there'd be any world where you could get your brothers to like enter into some kind of like mediation, be it legal or like with a social worker, or if there would be some world where you could talk to your parents about like distancing yourself from your brothers because of how they are making it impossible to carry out your daily living tasks. If your parents would hear you out on that one. The most I can say is that I'm really sorry that's happening, and that's awful. And yeah, I hope things get better.
Thank you. On what you just said about having my parents try to intervene, the part of the problem is that because my parents have been moved to assisted living, my brothers are just kind of assuming this position where they think they kind of control everything, even though they don't have the legal authority to. And this also means that my dad has been locked out of his own house, and they're using me as the justification for it.
Well, okay, then I do have to jump in again. If that's the case, then you absolutely must have some sort of lawsuit on your hands, because there's no world in which your parents can still be alive, still in control of their finances, and have your brothers locking them out of their own house and controlling where those things go. If there's some sort of, usually to get into assisted living, you have to draft some sort of paperwork and agreement about how these things get handled and distributed. If such paperwork exists, it should be pretty easy to demonstrate these were the agreed upon terms. These are the things that they're doing. Honestly, if I were you, what I would start doing is try to go about business as normal for the next month or so and document absolutely everything that happens. Make a paper trail, record videos, take pictures, whatever you need to do, and really document absolutely everything. Because what they're doing sounds like it's almost certain. I'm not a lawyer or anything like that, but I've had plenty of relatives who are in assisted living. That absolutely sounds like that has to be a breach of some sort of contract or law. So I would be really on top of trying to gather evidence to help support your case at this point. And I don't think this is going to be a lawsuit that's going to have to be on your hands. I think if they've signed an agreement with some sort of assisted living home or with the state in some sort of way, I don't even think that's going to have to be on you to... You might have to bring it to someone's attention, but I don't think it's going to have to be you carrying out that lawsuit. I think you having all that data is going to be really important.
You could also look into like legal helplines or other legal resources that are available, especially those that are tied to like disability in your state. Particularly, there sometimes exist like helplines that can give legal advice, that can tell you how you should approach these things if you want to build up this case. And it sounds like this would be something that is very doable in your situation.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't want to... I feel a little bit bad because there's not much advice that we can really give in this situation, especially because it doesn't sound like what you're struggling with is anything related to transition yourself explicitly, as much as it's your brother's problem with the fact that you're trans is just kind of like a tertiary fact in this scenario, but it sounds like there's something much worse going on at hand, and I'm not sure that we really ought to even give too much detailed thoughts on the situation. So, yeah.
Right. For me, it's just that in terms of my coming out, like I said, aside from calling you guys and my parents, that's kind of it. Nobody else really knows. I haven't talked to my doctors because there's just a lot going on, and I really, really want to move forward with transitioning. It's just that with everything going on, I'm really scared that if I start, that it's going to make it a lot more difficult to go through all of this. Because I'm already over.
Your transition status is your information to disclose. You do not have to tell your brothers. You do not owe anybody any of that information. It can be something between you and your doctor for the time being, and that's all it has to be if that's how you want to handle things.
Even like even if like they somehow already know that you're trans, I mean, like any steps you take are none of their business.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And this might be I suppose you could call it conditioning from the extended. Anyway, it's just I just have a fear, or some kind of innate fear that their behavior towards me is going to get worse. And
well, I think based on what you've described, I think that's not a completely unrealistic or unfounded fear. I think though, like we were saying earlier, I don't want to tell you, like, no, it's going to be fine, because I don't know the situation. Right. I think what you ought to do is work under the assumption that they're either going to continue how they're doing or maybe get worse. But that's not your problem. What's your problem is that they're interfering with your parents' ability to live their life and your ability to live your life, and try to stay focused on what actionable steps you can take to address that. And I also hope that you mentioned you're in therapy, so that is really good. I'm definitely glad you are in therapy, considering that situation. It sounds extremely difficult, but yeah, I'm really sorry that there wasn't more of a direct through line for us to help you on the situation, but I appreciate you calling in, and I'm really deeply sorry that you're in the scenario you're in.
Thank you. Yeah, I wasn't. Not like I was expecting you guys to pull some kind of Hail Mary out or anything, but you have been helpful at the very least, which is what I was hoping for. So thank you.
Yeah, definitely. Good luck, Alan.
And people that are more in contact with like legal resources will probably be better suited at giving more actionable advice in your given situation. That I would encourage you to look into like legal resources.
Absolutely, big time.
Yeah, I've been unfortunately thinking that might be the direction it has to go.
Yeah. Well, I wish you the best of luck, Alan, and I hope everything gets resolved for you as smoothly as possible. So, good luck, and we'll, yeah, thanks.
Have a good day.
You as well.
Yeah, best of luck.
Definitely a difficult situation. It is hard in those aspects where there's not much we can do to help, and someone's called in to help, and I'm like, I don't know. I don't know what to do. All right. So we're just gonna keep rolling. We've got full lines right now. You guys are calling in like crazy. It's great. We'll try to get to everyone. I might close the lines for now, so if you're on the line and you can hear me, stay on the line. We're gonna try to get to all of you. But considering there's still 5 of you left and it's 3:00, I'm going to close the line so we have nobody new enter that queue, and then we can get to everyone who's currently there. So let's talk to Cameron in Wisconsin. Pronouns are he, him. Cameron, you're live on the line. What's going on?
Hello.
Hello. What do you want to talk about today?
Well, hold on. Let me bring it up. I wrote it out because I have a very bad memory.
We love notes.
All right. So Does it make me bigoted to still use the label straight if two former partners have since transitioned? Is what my question was.
I think.
Did you say if a former partner transitioned? Like they transitioned after you broke up?
Yeah, two of my former partners have since transitioned.
So, I'm assuming they were assigned female at birth then, and you thought you were dating women, and it turned out that was not the case?
Indeed.
Okay. Well, in that case, I would say you can call yourself whatever the fuck you want. If you are still interested in primarily women, then I think you are straight. I don't think the fact that two people you've dated happen to be trans necessarily makes your sexuality change. I think it can, in some situations, be indicative of like things you were looking for in a partner that maybe are like atypical or something. But I'm kind of an advocate that I don't really like people's labels being affected by the partner they change necessarily. Like, my partner considers himself a straight man, and because most of the partners he's had have been women, and he's a cis man, and he often will say something to the effect of like, maybe I'm pansexual or maybe I'm bisexual, but I don't really care. It kind of feels a little bit like stolen valor to him, at least, to claim the label of being queer when he's pretty much exclusively been a cis man dating women.
Yeah, that's a similar situation I find myself in. It's like I could label myself as bi, but then I feel like I should put like bi with an asterisk because like it's not quite applicable, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
I personally think labels, especially regarding sexuality, should be entirely self-selected and like self-imposed. Even if you are a straight cis man who's almost predominantly dated women and then you like have a fling with a guy, I don't think that necessarily makes you suddenly bisexual or like not straight. I think it could be the case that you are still largely straight, but that person just did it for you or something. Like, I don't know what like use there is in telling people they have to like select a queer label now because they've had a relationship with a queer person or a not straight cis person. Yeah, those are kind of my thoughts. Naomi, did you want to?
Yeah, I think some other kind of questions you can ask yourself if you're like trying to explore this now is, okay, so like at the time you were dating this person, they understood themselves to be a woman, you understood them to be a woman, you were attracted to them, having that understanding. But nowadays, they understand themselves to be either a man, non-binary, transmasculine, somewhere in that spectrum. Kind of asking yourself, am I still attracted to this person? Like, given how things have changed, could I conceivably see myself being with this person again? Perhaps if situations were different, let's say they weren't your ex or whatever. Kind of asking yourself, did changing their gender actually change my attraction to them? Can help you kind of explore those boundaries. And I would also agree with Arden that like trying to like gatekeep and police the boundaries of sexuality labels is going to be just intrinsically messy because all of the boundaries are going to be blurred to some degree. And I mean, people also will come up with like micro labels for certain terms and certain sexualities. Like the example of somebody who's say like mostly a straight guy, but maybe there's like a guy that could do it for them. I've heard the term like hetero-flexible thrown out.
Yeah.
So you're welcome to explore like more specific niche labels if they feel better, but also like, if you understand your sexuality as I'm attracted to people that I understand to be women, and I no longer understand this person as a woman, I'm no longer attracted to them, then that would not be transphobic at all. I would actually be understanding them as a trans person, as the gender they transition to.
Yeah.
That's fair. I've gotten arguments from like both sides where some people call me one thing, other people call me another thing, and it's just a mess.
I mean, if the concern is what other people are calling you, I appreciate how that's frustrating and that you might want to like understand exactly how you feel so you can like correct the record or something. But I don't know. I honestly hate picking a label for my own sexuality. I will usually just tell people I'm bisexual because that gets the least amount of questions. But like, if you really want me to get down into it, I could be like, well, it's probably pansexual because gender isn't really something that I'm considering when I'm like selecting a mate. It's not that two groups work for me. It's that that's not a factor. And maybe I could be considered demisexual because I definitely prefer a strong, like, romantic or trust building connection before, like, being intimate with someone in that way. But at the end of the day, I don't really find use in those labels for me. They feel like they still fail to capture the entirety of my sexuality, and so I'm just kind of like, yeah, bisexual is pretty much right, but if you really want to hash out where my boundaries are, like, we could do that, but
And I can also say that, like, if the main concern is people, like, making fun of you or trying to, like, belittle your sexuality, that is their own problem that they are most certainly projecting onto you. And it's perfectly acceptable to be like, I like what I like, I'm confident in myself, and I can see that you clearly have some issues in this regard that you need to work through. Like,
Well, part of it too is like I also don't want to be disrespectful to them in a way.
Sure.
Because like I use their preferred pronouns now. Whenever I speak with them, it's just I still, like I said, I still identify as straight. So I don't want to be rude, But I don't. Oops, sorry.
No, sorry. I didn't mean to butt in. I'm obnoxious that way. I think kind of like Naomi said earlier, I think, to be honest, you respecting their pronouns, but then being like, yeah, sorry, I'm not into you because I'm straight, is like respecting their gender, acknowledging that, like, oh, I thought you were women, you aren't. So you are whoever you are, but yeah, I'm still straight. Like, I think that is the respectful thing to do.
Sounds good. I don't want to take up too much time. That was something that's been itching at me, and I don't usually catch you guys live, so.
Sure.
Yeah, well, appreciate the question.
Yeah, I'm glad you called in. If you don't think we did a good enough job, maybe call back next week when Katy and I are on or something, and maybe Katy will have a different perspective or something. But thanks for calling, Cameron.
Yep, thank you. Have a good day.
Bye.
Bye.
All right, we're going to keep rolling through. I'll do a quick reminder now. Once we're through the caller portion, we have 4 callers left on the line. I'm going to hopefully get to all of them if they all stay on the line. We're going to take super chats. So any super chats of $5 or more, we will read out live on air for y'all to see. So you can make us say all the crazy things you've always wanted. We're going to bring in Caden in Alberta, I think Canada. Pronouns are he, him. Caden, you're live on the line. What's going on?
Hey, I recently got introduced to you specifically, Arden, by seeing you with Matt Dillahunty, and I figured I'd try and, broaden my intellectual capacity with, getting into this side of the line. I'm in Alberta. We're kind of considered the Texas of Canada.
Right.
It's oil field country filled with bigots and assholes everywhere. And
Sure.
I don't really, we don't get much exposure to trans individuals. So I just had a genuine question for you. What is the difference between being a trans individual and having gender dysphoria?
Yeah, I think, probably the definition I would use that I think most people would use is that to be trans is to just have a gender identity that's different than the one you're assigned at birth. And gender dysphoria is more of like a actual, like, diagnosable condition. Maybe condition is not the right word. I know the DSM doesn't like the word condition, although I feel like kind of describes what the experience is. It is just the prolonged experience of distress when you are associated with your gender assigned at birth, if that is different than the gender that you are. I feel like that wasn't my best linguistic ninja move, so maybe Naomi can outdo me on the
Yeah. So broadly speaking, we use the term transgender to refer to an identity. So being trans is about knowing what gender I am, and it being different than the one that I was assigned at birth. Meanwhile, dysphoria refers to that psychological discomfort with the difference between the gender you were assigned at birth and the gender that you view yourself to be. So if somebody doesn't have any discomfort about, being born a certain gender but wanting to live as a different gender, then they wouldn't have gender dysphoria and they would still be trans. Or you could be trans and have gender dysphoria where you do want to live as a different gender and also there's some discomfort about the gender that you were born as. And so there's also the case of, like, trans people who have undergone medical transition, and they feel that medical transition and or social transition has cured their gender dysphoria, as in, like they used to feel really uncomfortable about their body, but since going on hormones, maybe since getting like top surgery or bottom surgery, now they just feel really happy and comfortable in their body, and so they no longer have that dysphoria, no longer have that psychological discomfort. And so, yeah, these concepts are often very much related. It's probably true that most trans people have some gender dysphoria, either on a kind of like medical biological level or on like a social level. But these can go away with treatment, with social transition, with medical transition. And it's not a strict requirement to being trans, because some people are just very confident and comfortable in their own body and their own skin, and power to them, honestly.
Fair enough. That's about as succinct as I can ask for. Thanks to both of you, and
Sweet, yeah.
keep up the good work.
Cool. Thanks,
Thank
Katie.
you very much.
Awesome. Have a great day. Yeah, no hate to Caden at all, but his voice is very similar to a troll caller that we've had. So I was like, my finger was hovering over the mute button. I was like, I swear, motherfucker, if you do a slur. But no, that was great. Caden was awesome. So yeah, thank you for doing a much more succinct definitions. I definitely was like tripping over my own words. All right. This call will be interesting. Gonna try not to poison the well. We're bringing in Rid, has no preference on pronouns in Poland. Rid, you're on the line. What do you want to talk about?
Hi there. So sorry if I'm stumbling over my words a bit. I'm just a wee bit nervous.
No worries.
So long story short, I'm in like the early stages of transitioning. I'm about to start on hormones, and so I'm originally from Wyoming, and so very rural, conservative place. Now I live in Poland. Definitely less rural, but still very conservative.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, I'm just wanting some advice, I guess, on, dating during the transitioning process, I suppose. And sorry about the no preference on the pronouns. I just am in a weird spot with pronouns right now.
Totally fine. We definitely allow for that. Sometimes we'll go hard on people because usually no preference is what we fill in when they're like, I don't do the stupid pronoun game.
Yeah,
or something,
I know.
So no, maybe there should be a distinction there to help us know who we're talking to. But yeah, Naomi, do you have any?
A handshake of baby trans and bigots of I don't have pronouns.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So your question is just to clarify. Your question is like, what is dating like, or like, are you just like nervous that it's going to be difficult, or?
It's more the latter part of that sentence. Yeah, I'm just nervous about the whole idea of it, especially since my entire life, and I'm almost 30 now, I've identified as a gay man, and I don't know, I just feel like this will be very much a paradigm shift when it comes to my dating life.
It definitely will be.
Yeah.
I identified as a gay man for a period of time before I transitioned, and I will say I'm very much like queer people are my family and where I feel like at home, and currently I often feel like my queer card gets taken away because my relationship is like very hetero looking and like cis normative on the outside. And so I do kind of feel sometimes like I'll be around queer people and like they don't know it. And I'm like, come on, you have to see that I'm also queer. And it's like just not landing. So there is a little bit of frustration sometimes, maybe if you feel very like integrated into the queer community, of where sometimes that gets not like revoked. I think once people know that you're trans or queer or whatever, like it's all back to normal. But like you might get some assumptions that feel different for you. I will say dating is not. There's two sides to this. On one hand, I've talked about on the show before that I detransitioned. I started transitioning as a teen, detransitioned, then transitioned again as an adult. Part of the reason I detransitioned is because I thought I would never find love, and that's definitely not true at all. finding people who are interested in you as a trans person is not difficult, actually, like kind of at all. What is difficult is finding people who are interested in you and like respectful of you and your gender identity. In my experience, especially if you're interested in men primarily, men who are interested in trans women have a very high propensity to treating you like a sex object. And that can feel really gross and not super pleasant. But they're definitely not the only guys out there. And I think you're probably not going to be struggling at all to find people who are interested in you and who'll make you feel loved and supported. It's more of finding people who are interested in you in a way that makes you feel like respected and safe and validated. That can be sometimes challenging as a trans person, I think. But that's just my experience also. I'm definitely not trying to speak for all trans people. Naomi, did you have any thoughts on
Yeah, I think that was really good to start with, just like queer people, trans people. We find love all the time. I married my wife and we are just so happy together. I promise that like love for trans people and queer people exists out there. If you're specifically looking for like how do I go about or how do I start dating as a trans person, I'd say that like starting kind of within the queer community can be a very safe place to start. There are dating apps that either have like queer sides or that you can like very explicitly like mark your profile as like, you know, I'm queer, I'm trans, I'm kind of early in transition. And specifically looking for people who are more on kind of like the bisexual or pansexual side of things will generally be better about handling like, you know, differences in gender presentation or differences in like your anatomy as a trans person. As well as like there's a whole side of dating apps, the T for T side, where trans people dating other trans people. If you're interested in other trans people, they will be a lot more understanding and empathetic of your experience as a trans person. And trans people can be very safe to date when you're kind of early on in your own transition, which is also a wonderful way to connect with the trans community. And then just kind of like the old fashioned way of just like establishing yourself within a community, looking for like local queer events in your area. I know that especially around like college campuses or other towns, there's a lot of queer events going on that if you look for them and just meeting people, seeing if there's anybody you like and you know, shooting your shot, like absolutely. There's community out there and there are some strategies you can take to look for safer people to kind of start dating and exploring and just doing what feels right.
For sure. How does that land with you, Rid?
I mean, that lands all very well. It's very encouraging to hear, I should say. You know, it's very much, I mean, obviously, I'm not the first person to go through this, but hearing the way that you've both laid this out in terms of, you know, there is a community, there is ways of going about this that are still safe, and I don't know, it sounds hopeful, long story short.
Good.
I mean, yeah, it's very positive. Sorry if I'm stumbling over my words once again.
No worries. Yeah, I think, you know, just try not to be too hard on yourself and just kind of like, I think pre-transition, a lot of us can be somewhat like performative in relationships because, I mean, you know, maybe there's some insecurity there about not feeling like you're expressing your full self and maybe trying to appeal to like a partner or something and what they might want. I think it's really important to try to just like really embrace that journey of being like fully honest and open with people about like, this is who I am and you can take it or leave it. And I found that kind of approach has been really, really healing for me. Maybe not all trans people felt the way I did before relationships, but I definitely got into a few bad situations where I was like trying to appeal to a partner and I was like, oh, I just want them to like me. I want them to like love me and be interested in me. And finally being able to be like, whether or not you're interested, this is who I am, take it or leave it. I was able to find people who like really authentically loved me and like really iron out like who's actually really there for me in like my peer support group as well. And I think that's been a really empowering thing to be like, cool, I know now that I can show up as myself and still be loved and accepted and supported. And yeah, that can be really, really healing for a lot of people.
And I think that'll be really nice or like really good for me to keep in mind because I don't plan on being in Poland past the end of this upcoming August. I'm relocating to do my master's and hopefully settle down permanently a little bit further west than Poland. I'm thinking either the Netherlands or France. And so, like, I don't know, preparing for all of this and then also trying to keep in mind, like, how it's all going to be with this, newly transitioning. It's just I'm trying to prepare myself all the way around for it. A lot of big life changes, and I just moved back to Europe this last year, so it's just one thing after another, it seems.
Yeah, definitely sounds like it would be very nerve-wracking for me. I can't even imagine going through the transition, like, not in your home country. I imagine that would be another level of added anxiety that could be on there, but I'm sure it'll be great. I know, with the exception of, like, is it Italy? Like, most European countries are pretty good on trans rights, so hopefully you won't run into too many issues with all your traveling.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys very much. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for calling in.
Thank you, Rid.
Thank you, and love you guys. I listen to you all the time. Seriously, cannot get enough of you.
Thank you so much. I hope we were helpful, and we'll talk to you soon, all right?
Sounds good. Bye.
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 Alrighty. We've got 2 callers left on the line. I honestly thought, when I saw, like, we had 5 callers at 3, I was like, oh man, I hope Naomi's ready. This might be a longer show. And now it's 3:20 and we're through, like, we only have 2 left. So, let's make sure I got this on. Okay. We are going to talk to next Teresa in the USA. Pronouns are they, them. Teresa, you are live on Transatlantic. What's going on?
Hello. So I have a problem. Sorry. Sorry. I have a problem. So there is somebody in a community I know who is a predator. And they're a trans woman, and I know this for a fact. Like, I have the proof, verifiable. I don't know how to address it through our group of people, because given how everything's going, like, in the United States, I don't want it to be harped on in a bad way towards trans people, but they need to be, like, not around us, you know?
Yeah, so is there, like, a slightly more specific... It feels like you're getting to a more specific question. Sorry, I don't want to jump the gun.
No. What is the right way to go about this? Because I don't want... So this person has been of an inappropriate nature to somebody online, like somebody that has a platform, and I know this to be the fact. I wanted to be able to talk to my friends about this. Like, we have a pretty sizable community of a few thousand people, but I don't know how to do it in a way that would possibly make people think that we're predators.
Is this like an online community or like an in-person community?
Online, but several of us have met up.
Yeah. Well, my initial thoughts are going to be that... I'm
trying to be vague in case anybody hears it, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. My initial thoughts are that while I appreciate wanting to be considerate of the dynamic that trans people are in the United States, and that this framework of, being represented that way is unfair and something that does happen, I also don't think that trans people should get a pass to be excluded from criticism because we're trans and because that dynamic exists. Definitely, I think trying to hold people accountable is important. I obviously I appreciate that you're trying to be vague and, maybe protect the other identities of other people who might be involved or whatever. I think I would start, if I were you, by trying to reach out to an individual or two who you are closest to in this group and express to them that this is, like, something you would like to do and that you're planning to go forward with it, and making sure that they, like, have your back and understand where you're coming from. And I think that can be probably a good, helpful way to go about this thing. I think you probably also have to be prepared for the fact that people are really difficult about issues like this, and it might not go exactly how you want it to. I know my sibling, was in a similar situation where they had to out someone in one of their friend groups. And while a number of their friend group understood and was like, yeah, we support you, we're good with that, there were a number of people who like didn't buy it and didn't accept it and went on being friends with that person. And then, they had a hard time interacting with that side of the friend group because of that. So yeah, I think, but probably talking to people who you trust and that you're extra close to in this group would be a good start.
Well, I would, but the ones I was close to kind of isolated me. Actually, they did isolate me. Several of them did.
Okay.
And then I've talked to some people and showed them, and they're like, yeah, you need to talk about this. I'm kind of torn between it because, like, I don't know, it's difficult for me.
You said you brought this to some people and they told you that you need to talk about it. It sounds like that is kind of along the lines of what...
The talking about it part I'm okay with, but I worry about the impact it'll have. I'm less worried about the people who have isolated me for it. I'm more worried about the impact it'll have on us as trans people.
Okay, as far as that goes, I personally don't think that should be a concern. I think that there have been trans people who have been outed, very public, high-profile trans people who've been outed as having problems with this, and I think it's been pretty easy for the trans community to say, hey, trans people are people, and these things happen, and, just because this one person's a predator doesn't justify your implication that all trans people are predators of some sort. So
and this is also the kind of thing that you can handle like within community. Like you don't have to make this a full-blown like national news story. It can be the kind of thing where maybe you talk to community leaders or moderators or other people that like have power or control or leadership within this kind of online community about how a certain member is making you feel unsafe and that you want to address this before somebody gets hurt.
I would, but I'm blacklisted there too. I'm blacklisted in the whole community.
I mean, I would want to get into why then, because I'm not.
I addressed this person. This person had been slinging mud my way for over a year. I finally got tired of it, told them off. They told one of the head people in the community, and I essentially got banned and then blacklisted. And like 2 weeks in, I was going to be banned for 30 days. I got blacklisted.
Well, okay.
And I don't know why. They didn't say anything or anything. Just one Friday morning, I woke up blacklisted. Some of my friends there blocked me. Some of the moderators and stuff. Other people, regular members and stuff, they don't know what's going on. They don't have any info. Pretty much somebody's allowed to say whatever. I have no clue.
Yeah, I think, so this is difficult, Teresa. I think at this point, while I appreciate wanting to be vague and not give details and maybe protect certain people involved, I'm not sure how much we can help you without specific details. And furthermore, it doesn't sound like this issue, like the only part of this that we can really address on this show, that the show is really designed to address, is the aspect of it where you're saying, I'm nervous about this reflecting on trans people broadly, and I don't really know how much more I have else to give you, other than, like we said, if this person has harmed people, they deserve to be held accountable for that, and that being trans, like the trans community is not going to crumble or lose all of its rights because you outed one bad person, and I think we'll endure and survive, and we will continue to advocate for our rights in spite of something like that. I'm sorry I can't give you more specific advice on the how to address it within your community thing, because I without the details, I don't think I can really do much, and I'm not going to pressure you to give details about something so sensitive live on air in front of people. I don't think that's a good idea. I don't think it helps your situation or anyone here. So I might have to ask that we, maybe you reach out to like one of us privately and try to like give us more details or something. But I'm not sure that there's much that I can even do. Yeah.
Okay, I understand. I know it's something that might need to be more specific. I get that.
Yeah. I'm sorry I can't offer you more
Okay.
explicit advice, but
No. It's okay. Thank you both so much, and thank you for everything you both do. You're wonderful. Love the hell out of both of you.
thanks, Teresa. Best of luck. We'll talk to you soon, all right?
Thank you.
Bye.
All right.
Bye.
Yeah, that's a difficult one. Twice today where we've got calls where it's a trans person going through a difficult situation, but the issue isn't trans related, and so I'm like, I don't know really how to help in that situation. I think you need, like, maybe not law enforcement, because maybe there's some issues there, but it sounds like you need a professional, of which I am not. I am only a professional transgender person. My only notable skill. All right, the last caller of today. We are going to bring in Igor from Serbia. Pronouns are he, him. I thought I clicked the button. There we go.
Hello.
Igor, you are live on the line. What's going on?
Well, I was watching a lot about trans people, and you have a question in front of you. What do you say to the women who don't want to share women's spaces with trans women, like dressing rooms, toilets, prisons, and similar stuff? I'm new to all this. I'm fascinated with the problem.
Sure. So I would say, well, probably first I would ask why.
Well, they say they feel ashamed, uncomfortable, unsafe. I mean, that is what I heard.
Sure. But is it my responsibility if somebody feels uncomfortable with me using a restroom or using a changing room, doing nothing to affect anybody else? Is it my responsibility to cater to their irrational fear that I could potentially be a problem for them?
Yes.
Yes.
I mean, yeah. I mean.
So how did that work out? How did that work out? Hold on, Igor. How did that work out in the civil rights era when people were saying that people of color were a risk to their safety and their threat, and that's why they needed to segregate different bathrooms and water fountains in schools? I think we pretty much resoundingly noticed that it's not the responsibility of the marginalized people to cater to the irrational fears that the hegemonic class has about them, and that, in fact, we should encourage diversity and inclusion and help them to understand that their irrational fears are exactly that, irrational.
We can also just take a look at the facts. Study after study has demonstrated that trans women and trans people broadly are disproportionately victims of assault and privacy violations in these spaces, not the perpetrators of crimes. And so if we truly want to value the facts of the situation over people's feelings, then we would want to assess that there's not a tangible threat here. And also, actually, the opposite is true, that when policies are enacted which exclude trans people from spaces like bathrooms and changing rooms, etc., that this results in more assaults and privacy violations occurring in those spaces. So I like to just take the factual approach and side with policies that are going to improve safety for everyone.
Yeah, but by that logic, I can go into women's room and say I have no bad intentions.
Yeah, but
I just want to
Igor, if we had a law that said trans women couldn't use women's spaces, you could still do that. These laws aren't affecting your ability to just walk into a women's room and say, I'm a woman. It changes literally nothing about the situation.
Please repeat. I didn't catch what you said.
I said, even if we existed in a world where we didn't allow trans women in bathrooms or changing rooms, you could still just walk in there and say, I'm a woman.
Yeah.
These laws wouldn't stop you from doing that.
Well, we may get a mutiny about that. I mean, how do you say? They can protest that.
But as Naomi just pointed out, it doesn't actually protect them better. As Naomi just cited data that showed that, in fact, there are more privacy violations in environments where those restrictions existed.
I don't know about the data, but okay.
So
Yeah,
Igor,
I can cite a study if you're interested in that.
So
what?
Naomi's offering to give you a citation on that.
Okay, I'm all open.
But here's the thing, Igor. If Naomi shows you peer-reviewed academic data that shows what she's saying, are you going to accept that?
I will accept the data, but I'm still not. I'm still not okay with. I'm open to the open to the possibility. I don't know. I'm old guard. I mean, if you understand, it's so strange to me.
So
Naomi's
got
we were always segregated, but female and male. And
well, that's not entirely true, though, right? Because trans women have existed for a very long time. We're not new, and we've been using women's spaces for as long as we've been around. So it's not true that they've always been purely sex segregated. Also, Naomi has a study up on screen showing what she was claiming. So are you now more open to trans women being allowed to access women's spaces, considering there's no demonstrated risk? Considering there's no demonstrated risk, and there is in fact a risk of further privacy violations under the dynamic you're advocating for.
Bring back the title. I didn't manage to read.
Oh yeah, the title of the study is School Restroom and Locker Room Restrictions and Sexual Assault Risk Among Transgender Youth. And they found multiple times odds ratios increasing the risk of sexual assault and privacy violations when policies were enacted which restricted trans people's access to bathrooms. The rate was 1.26 times higher in transgender boys. 1.42 times higher in AFAB non-binary youth, and 2.49 times higher in transgender girls. So that's a 250% change in sexual assault of transgender girls when we enact these policies.
Yeah, I see. I didn't know that.
So, does that change your mind?
There's a thing about women feeling ashamed of biological males.
But again, Igor, this is the first thing that I said. Women can be afraid, just like before the Civil Rights Acts were enacted in the United States. Women are allowed to be irrationally afraid of whoever they want. But is it the responsibility of the marginalized group to stop using the spaces where we are the safest because other people have an irrational, not evidence-based fear that we could potentially do something to them? I would say, no, it's absolutely not my fucking responsibility if some crazy person has an irrational fear about me that's founded on nothing. I'm not going to live my life catering to people who are suggesting that I am a problem with absolutely no evidence.
Yeah, and when somebody has an irrational fear like that, that's their own problem to work through because there's no evidence backing up that fear. Maybe they could benefit from some kind of therapy. Maybe they could benefit from, just challenging and asking themselves, okay, what is this fear based off of? Is there actually a tangible threat? Looking into the data, because the facts show that their fear, that they're feeling, is entirely unjustified.
I see. Okay. That answers my question.
Cool. Thanks, Igor.
All right,
Have a
thank you,
nice
Igor.
day.
Bye.
I will call another time.
I'm sure you will.
If you don't mind.
No, that's fine. That's what the show's for.
Thank you.
Thank you, Igor. All right. That went slightly better than expected. I mean, there was a little bit of a nervous laugh thing that made me think Igor might have been a troll, but considering he kind of digested the information and kind of refined it after a minute, I'll just take that as nervous laughter and not actually him being a
I was
troll.
pleasantly surprised. Absolutely. I cannot hear you.
I hit the
Could
wrong...
be on my end.
No, I hit the wrong mute button.
Okay.
I went to mute Collins Studio as I closed it, and I muted myself instead. Thank you so much to Dragon for call screening today. Great job. We had a lot of callers, and they were interesting callers, too. Yeah, awesome show. All right, let's move on. We're going to do Super Chats, so any Super Chat of $5 or more, we will read out live right here on this portion of the show. I'll kick it off, and then we can rotate back and forth.
Yeah.
Right. We've got $5 from William Matz. Love you, folks. At the line, excuse me. Thanks for helping me discover myself. I used she, they pronouns last time I called into the show and smiled wide. That's awesome. See, people give us crap for doing pronouns for absolutely everyone, but it's just so obviously the best way to handle it, especially when, like, we have no other information about you. So I'm glad that made you happy. Thanks, William.
I think it's also a very effective pre-screening tool.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, the people who are like, who do the thing we mentioned earlier, the I don't buy into that pronoun stuff. I'm like, okay, well, I know what I'm getting with you.
We have 20, is that euros or pounds? From Jacques Greenland, pounds. My heart goes out to all my trans and non-binary brothers and sisters in Florida this week. I had to jump through hoops to change my documents, but what's happening there is hideous. Hashtag Team Arden.
Yeah, for sure. I really don't understand how they're going to be able to get away with also invalidating the licenses of people who've changed their ID. I know that's their stated intent, and that just seems to me like something that would so obviously get smacked down in court. Like, if you have people who are like, I've been tolerant of the laws up until now, this is the breaking point, I want to leave the state. Now their license is invalid, that they're using to flee the state because of the law you enacted. Like, that is their right to do that. And this law effectively makes people like refugees within their own home state. Or not even refugees, like, I'm not sure what the exact term would be. People who are like effectively trapped within Florida, unable to escape. It just seems preposterous
and
to me.
There's also just so many edge cases where it's going to be really tricky how they're even going to be able to tackle this, because, I mean, we've seen, like, all the time that there are, like, clerical issues on, like, birth certificates and other forms of IDs that get updated, or intersex people who are, like, wrongly assigned a certain gender at birth will later change those documents, and it is not easy to discern the difference between a trans person, an intersex person, or somebody that had a clerical error if you're trying to just, like, revoke all of the changes to these kinds of IDs.
Yeah, I know they do have a law drafted, but this came down from just a policy order from the, like I said, the executive director of like the Florida DMV equivalent, and hostages. Yes, that is more of what I was thinking of. And I know a similar thing happened in here in Texas when the who was it? Was it the AG? Tried to issue a directive that, like, the CPS in Texas needs to take trans kids out of the homes of affirming parents. And that wasn't a law that was passed, it was just a directive that was handed down. And that generally isn't very effective. So it's weird to me that they would even try this, and that they wouldn't just do what they've done with everything else and shotgun attempt, 20 laws in 20 different states and then feel like, this was the strategy that worked the best. Yeah, definitely a mess. I don't think that it's a super tenable situation, but we'll see how that goes. 100 Czech Krunas, whatever, from Naresh. Sub ladies, I still don't have a job, but maybe next week. Also, hello, Gloser and Red. Hope you see this. Are those like your dogs? Hopefully they're not people and I wasn't just like super insensitive.
I do not know those people.
No idea. I also don't get like any references. They always go over my head.
We have 50 PLNs from Dory Kadlabowski. Hey, greetings from Poland. I hope you guys are doing okay. I just want to say I managed to get my gender record changed according to Polish law as plans. Since 15th of December, I am legally a woman. Congratulations very much.
Yeah, that's so exciting. Congrats, Dory. I thought I knew the caller had mentioned that Poland is relatively conservative, and I was under the impression that they had like very restrictive laws. So it's cool that they actually even allow for that.
Must have been a whole process.
Yeah, my perception of Poland is totally skewed. One of the two. Another 100 Czech crowns, or Czech stacks as we call them here, from Naresh. I recently dyed my nails again after like a year or so. I may not be good at it, but I think it looks nice. Somehow I even kind of like how it looks when a little worn and unrepaired. Is that weird? No, I totally get that. That's the like punk rocker look that I think a lot of people were going for when I was in high school. Yeah.
We have $5 from Liggett Lanius Jr. Is it okay to respectfully use your pronouns, but be uncomfortable with being asked for pronouns? Is it mandatory to answer what are your pronouns? It's an interesting question. I think that for some people, especially if they're kind of more like gender queer or perhaps like questioning, being asked directly about their pronouns can be an uncomfortable question, especially if they don't know the answer themselves or know what the answer should be. If somebody were to ask you that, you could certainly say that like you're kind of questioning or you're still trying to figure things out, and put the onus back on them to kind of handle the conversation from there.
Yeah, I think kind of like we were talking to that one caller about internalized transphobia. Like, is it okay to be uncomfortable? Like, yeah, I mean, you can't control that you feel uncomfortable with the question. But similarly, I think it's important to ask why, and like, should you not answer because you're uncomfortable? Yeah, those are my thoughts. Investigate that for yourself. We've got $5 from Storm Chaser Noah. Great show. Got some good things to counter transphobic rhetoric with. Awesome.
I'm glad he's only chasing storms.
Right. Glad hopefully there was some help there. That's great.
We have €5 from Jonathan Brockett. Why did the NB take up prospecting?
Oh, this is a joke.
Oh, we need another one. We need the answer to the joke.
They heard
there were gold in them there hills.
Yeah,
nice.
It's pretty good. I like that one. Thank you, Jonathan Brockett, for the €10 total. We've got now $10 from Alan Guritz. Do you think that the value we put on male roles / female roles is the main problem with how we think about gender? I'm not good with words, but I'm trying to learn. Thanks. The show is so important. Yeah, I definitely... So we actually had a TikTok that got a ton of hate comments recently, where Katy was basically advocating for like gender abolitionism, but clarifying that like the beauty of gender abolitionism is if you want to be like a trad wife or a trad man, you can do that. Like the whole point of gender abolitionism is to let people do what they want with their gender and with their life. It's just, as you put it, Alan, not putting emphasis or value on somebody's conforming or resisting conforming with those roles.
Yeah, or if you want to take even like the more milder side of gender abolition, or the milder take would be that these roles themselves can have value and they can be meaningful for certain people, but the main issue is that these values are often coercively assigned to people, where it's like you're expected to fit into this tiny little box even though it might not be right for you, even though these kind of tiny little boxes will hurt men and women by limiting the kinds of things that they're at least socially allowed to do and to be respected and to be seen as valuable and worthy. And so it's more that coercive element that is really kind of the core problem.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely don't think liking being stereotypically male or female is inherently problematic. Yeah. I think this one's you. I think I read the last one.
Okay, we have 69.69 checks from Naresh. Jonathan, you got to prepare your super chats in separate tabs so that you can send them in quick succession.
To be fair, they were one after another, so Jonathan might not have been as quick as you wanted, Naresh, but quick enough for my system to organize them correctly. We've got $9.99 from Louise Richardson. I think there should be mixed cis/trans women's basketball, volleyball teams to compete publicly to show there is no essential difference between them. Yeah, I'm fine with the notion of like there might be some very specific situations where an individual might have some sort of competitive advantage because of like puberty or whatever, but just because that could be the trait of somebody in that group doesn't mean that we should assume that that is true of everyone in that group. And I think, if somebody tries out for a team and they get in, awesome. Like, I don't know why it has to be more complicated than that.
Yeah, I will also say that like a lot of sports leagues or other sports organizations do operate more at like the local level, and that this would mean that they are legally responsible of coming up with their own policies in terms of inclusivity and fairness. And so you'll see lots of like sports local leagues that do have trans inclusive policies, and they often just don't get talked about in the news because either they're just local or small, and they just operate with no issues because there's not this huge upset of trans women dominating sports like the conservatives want to believe is true.
Yeah, even some of the viral cases, like, they find one time they've won and they're like, see, and then it's like, yeah, but if you look at their actual competitive record, they don't win that often. So it's like,
yeah,
so silly. 100 Czech sex crowns from Naresh. One of my former partners transitioned. That's not when I stopped calling myself straight. I stopped when I realized that if he wasn't an abusive Jimmy hole, I could imagine myself still being with him. Yeah, that totally makes sense. And that's if the caller had told a story like that, like I was with people who I thought were women, found out they weren't, and then I still had feelings for them, then it probably would have included to me that maybe that person just wasn't straight to begin with. But that isn't the impression.
That's a really good example highlighting like the straight versus not straight distinction in that kind of situation.
Yeah.
$5 from Aubrey. Gay. Also, hashtag Team Snake Mom.
Thanks. Got so many. Someone want to buy one? I've got a lot. ready for new homes. We've got $5 from Taco Bell 2009. Started yesterday. This show has been so pivotal in helping me discover myself. Love y'all. Hashtag Team Arden. Well, thank you so much, Taco Bell. I wish you the best of luck on your transition journey. Try not to be too impatient, because I believe the data seems to show that slower, gradual changes actually lead to better long-term results. So, as frustrating as it is, be patient. It'll come.
$5 from Beck Vagnarelli. Tomorrow is my 30th birthday, and I'm so happy I was able to spend it with you wonderful people, viewers included. Aw, that's so sweet. Happy birthday.
Yeah, happy birthday, Beck. All right, we've got $5 from the Ben B. Arden and Naomi. Gotta be one of the best duos. Thank you so much. With how much I've been watching Naomi's channel, I have to go hashtag Team Naomi this week. Love y'all. Very nice.
Thank you so much. We have $10 from Breadbox of Doom. Wonderful show as always. I love all the hosts, but I will always be hashtag Team Arden.
Thank you so much, Breadbox. Also, I love the name. Breadbox of Doom. I don't know if it's a reference to something, but it's a great combination.
Solid name.
10 alleged Australian dollars from Sony Ericsson. Good day. Can you please point me towards a resource to help me better understand how I can be born trans given that gender is a social construct? Thank you. So, this is a really common mistake and a fault of the language where we use gender to refer to two distinct concepts. So when we're saying somebody is born trans, we're talking about their gender identity, and that is like a durable psychological construct, which is multivariate in how it manifests, but it's pretty durable for most people. Not all people, but for most people, it's pretty durable over the course of their life. When we're talking about gender as a social construct, we are talking about gender as in like the abstract concepts of masculinity and femininity and the roles that men and women take in society. At least that's my perception of how those two things are different. I don't know if Naomi has a different take.
Yeah, I think that when we're trying to kind of approaching this topic, it's important to recognize that like who we are as a person, who we are as like a, psychological being, as a thinking, feeling brain is influenced both by biological predispositions and then socialization and how we respond to that socialization. And so when people are saying something like, I was born trans, or that there are factors related to that make me born trans, if you look into like the biological literature especially, you'll find that there are certain correlations or predispositions that happen like as fetuses are developing in the womb that are correlated with being trans. Things like there's a couple genetic factors that we're still trying to kind of get to the bottom of, as well as like certain hormone washes in the womb where exposure to different hormones during kind of like different periods of fetal development is linked to the body developing in one way where the brain kind of has some predispositions in a different direction that makes somebody more likely to identify as trans. And so for a lot of trans people, they feel that like this trans identity was something that they knew as soon as they could communicate it from a very young age. And to them, it feels like, you know, they were just born this way, likely because they had a lot of like biological predispositions going into it. And they were able to express this in a safer environment from a younger age. And so ultimately, I would say that it's a little bit more complicated, and it's kind of like both biology and sociology will play a role in it. But that's kind of the perspective of why somebody might say that.
Yeah, I think to add on to like something that I like to point out when we're talking about people being born trans, like I think it's obviously pointing out that there are correlations is really good because it's not, and that's why I said multivariate as well, because it's like there's not like one factor that like, this gene is there, you're gonna be trans. Like there's epigenetic changes over the course of your life, and like you were talking about hormone washes in the womb and things like that. But I think one way that we tend to think about people as being born trans is more of a nature rather than a nurture aspect of who they are, is in part because when you try to implement things like conversion therapy, for example, it is extremely ineffective and doesn't tend to change someone's identity, but causes them to have a deep complex of like self-hatred associated with their identity. Much like handedness, for example. Handedness is very durable over people's life, and before we realize that there's no demonic aspect of being left-handed, people would often get like, you know, the crack of the ruler on the hand when they wrote with their left hand. And that didn't stop people from being left-handed. What it did is cause them to have an association that is highly negative with when they use what their brain would naturally go for. But yeah, I think all of that is distinct from the broad understanding of gender in the abstract, which is where the notion of social construct comes from. But anywho, we have now got, I think,
$10 from Jifka. Pronouns for all. One of my kids identifies as non-binary, but still uses their feminine given name. Without pronouns, they'd be misgendered all the time. Pronouns hurt no one, but help so many. Yeah, absolutely. Like, just another way of people expressing themselves. I also like to use the example of you know, using somebody's preferred pronouns is a lot like respecting somebody's nickname. It costs you nothing, but it makes them feel more seen and able to express themselves. So, like, power to them.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got $5 from Larry Fishman. The ladies, estrogen and progesterone, have decreed that I should have dimples when I smile and be bi. HRT is such a ride. That is good fun. Well, congrats on discovering more of yourself through HRT.
$5 from Monkey at Typewriter. I told a gender critical at work about Naomi's breastfeeding journey. He was stunned into speechlessness. And for that, I'm hashtag Team Nominal this week.
Nice.
Absolutely. Yeah, I've broken a lot of people's brains over the fact that I was able to breastfeed my child.
It's so... It makes me wonder, like, I know we joke a lot in the trans community about, like, basic biology doesn't represent, like, the truth a lot. And once you get past the basic biology, you start to understand the complexity a little bit more. But also, like, I feel like I remember understanding pretty early on in basic biology in, like, high school that, like, the differences between male and female bodies were largely due to, like, the hormone environments that were in developing afterwards. And it's not like there's just, like, a magic different tissue that like female people might have that male people just never get. Like, it doesn't, I swear everyone slept through a class or something that's shocking to them, but
yeah, so much of sexual differentiation is like our bodies start out as mostly sexless templates that can develop in different directions based off of hormonal influences. And like in mammals, like that's where lactation comes from, literally the word mammals, mammary glands. Like lactation is just a hormonal process with the right hormones, being able to develop the right tissues and ducts, etc. and then adding the prolactin hormone, you are able to lactate.
Right. Yep. All right. Oh, is this one me? 100 check sex from Naresh. I finished the joke before Jonathan did. You are overestimating yourself, Arden. Just ask Jonathan. Oh, I'm sorry. You were faster than I realized. I didn't mean to take your credit.
We have $20 from Narcissa. Very quickly, why do we tell Jimmy to F himself? And then what you think of stealth women having short and long-term relationships with guys who you do not tell them about yourself. I think it's not their business.
Yeah. Like, I definitely think, I'll get to the why we tell Jimmy to fuck himself. But in terms of, like, the relationship things, I do think, like, you know, if you're going to have a long-term relationship with somebody, I'm very much an advocate of, like, that, like we were saying earlier and, like, last week, that honesty is really important, and that I think telling them that you're trans is a part of that for most people. But also, there's an element of trans women have been, in many cases, murdered or, you know, physically assaulted when they revealed that they were trans people. And I think trans people are well within their right to reserve that information until they're confident that it's safe. But also, I agree in principle, you aren't owed all the details about every person you ever choose to interact with in, like, a sexual or romantic or intimate way. And that I would hope people are honest most of the time, but it's not like I don't think it's like a moral obligation for people to be like, let me detail for you my entire biological history and medical history before we have romantic relationships. Like, you're just not owed that information. As far as why we tell Jimmy to fuck himself, Jimmy doesn't like compliments and finds it more comfortable when people just tell him to go fuck himself. So that's what we do. And then last one for the day. Another $10 from Breadbox of Doom. Thanks. It's not a reference, just a shitty old LimeWire username. Damn, I just aged myself, didn't I? No, totally fine. I didn't think it was a reference, but I don't know. Everyone always gets mad at me because I miss every reference ever, so I tend to just assume I'm missing something. But that was the last super chat of the day. Thank you guys so much for being here and showing up for the show. I really appreciate it. Thank you to Dragon again for call screening some great calls today. Thank you to the mods for keeping the chat respectful and on point and focused, combative people to hear, to call and talk and call in and talk live on air. And thank you to Naomi for being here and being a guest this week. I really appreciate it. Do you want to, like, plug all your stuff last minute? There are links in the description, but...
Yeah, absolutely. I'm nominal.naomi. I'm a PhD student, and I sometimes talk about trans issues on the internet as well. You can find me on YouTube, Twitch, TikTok. Mostly do things on YouTube these days. Had a little bit of a hiatus, but kind of interested in slowly coming back into doing some more things. So please check out my channel. Hope you find it interesting.
Nice. Awesome. Yes, definitely check those links that are in the description and post it in chat and stuff. Naresh wanted to sneak in another 100 check stacks to say last one for the day. You're proud of yourself for that one, aren't you? Thank you, everyone. With that, we're going to wrap up, but we will see you all next week back here with me and Katy again. Bye. And if you want to get your name over on that scrolling list, you just got to go to patreon.com/calltheline. And you can get a special shout out at the end of every show, access to exclusive Zoom hangouts, so much cool stuff.